All right. So we're going to first talk about the health risks and impacts from data centers, and define data centers a little bit more. I'm, like I said, Josephine Gingrich, Health Advocacy Outreach Coordinator for PSRPA, and then I will pass it after I do my portion to my colleague Matt Shara, our Policy and Program Coordinator. So the first thing that I want you all to know about data centers is that it means more fracking and more oil and gas infrastructure in our state. There are data centers proposed for nuclear power plants, and there's other, energy types that folks have been talking about. But the majority of Pennsylvania infrastructure and proposed Pennsylvania power for the data centers through 2030 is methane gas and gas-fired power plants. So we have the risks of increased shale gas development, which comes with it, pipelines, well pads, compressor stations, and the pollution from those. Um, like I said before, data centers are a, a nebulous term for a lot of people, like not sure what exactly a data center means because you may have heard folks say, oh, we use data centers for internet, and that's true. But the hyperscale data centers that we're seeing proposed across the state are significantly different. Another health risk, even with the ones that are potentially nuclear powered or renewables powered, are their turbines that they use as backup power. So we have gas and diesel backup generators proposed for a lot of these facilities. This is an example of a hyperscale data center campus that's been built in Memphis. And this is to power the Musk's Grok 3 AI. And when folks initially saw it built and it got up and running, it wasn't connected to the grid right away. And they were running their backup turbines 24/7 to power the facility. They initially had reported that they had 14 generators on site, but they used drone footage and fence line monitor folks found that they had 35 portable methane gas turbines. And when I say portable, um, these are semi-truck sized things on big trailers that can be towed around. But the issue with them being considered portable is they're regulated differently. They don't have as strict air permits because they're considered temporary, and temporary isn't defined. And so this is a risk to Pennsylvania. For example, up in Lackawanna County, you may have heard a little bit about how Archbald, Pennsylvania has several of these proposed. And in total, of the 6 data center campuses proposed for that one town, they have over 1,000 uh, backup generators proposed for that one community. Although we don't know a ton of long-term health impacts on the data centers themselves because hyperscale data centers are fairly new, the um, the health risks of diesel pollution, gas-fired power plant pollution, and other oil and gas related infrastructure pollution is known and well studied. It's estimated that by 2028, data centers can contribute to an additional 600,000 asthma cases a year nationwide in the United States. And that is attributed to a lot of their generators and the energy that they use. Other health impacts include noise, light, vibration, both from fracking and drilling, but the noise and the vibration that you've probably heard about from these facilities. Folks have reported that you can hear a data center vibrating from up to a mile away. And there's the impacts from the audible noise and then also the inaudible infranoise, and folks have measured the infranoise as having additional negative health impacts potentially on your ears, your circulatory system, your heart, from the shaking. There's anecdotal stories from folks in Virginia, which is known as Data Center Alley, that they have to sleep in their basements to escape the noise and the vibration at night. And this is a video. Um, I'm not sure if the sound is playing correctly, of the truck traffic that you might hear from a facility. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the energy production now. This is the Lackawanna Energy Center up in Lackawanna County. It's a gas-fired power plant. Um, and as I had mentioned before, gas is going to be the primary energy for data centers. It's one of the reasons Pennsylvania has been so focused on as a potential site. Right now, Pennsylvania is number 4 in the nation for proposed data center facilities. Texas is still ahead of us. Virginia still has over 600 proposed for their state. But we are getting up there, unfortunately, with over 50 proposed across the state now. And again, I'm talking about these hyperscale facilities. Um, we have multiple proposed in the state that also are proposing their own additional power plant dedicated solely for the data center, a whole gas-fired power plant that could power more than one city, such as the Homer City Power Plant that's proposed in Southwest Pennsylvania. Um, some of the pollution that's directly from these gas-fired power plants includes the various air emissions and water contamination listed here. We have been installing across the state air monitors to monitor some of this the air quality impacts from these types of facilities. And a lot of these pollutants line up with also what the diesel generators and gas generators, since it's all oil and gas, would have. So it's gas-fired power plant pollution as well as the backup generators that they may run in addition. This is a little bit more granular detail on the particulate matter, which is the first one listed at the top here. And it includes impacts to your respiratory health, like lung inflammation, impaired lung function, like we had mentioned before, asthma exacerbation. It also has cardiovascular impacts, risks of heart attacks, irregular heartbeat. It has neurological issues such as headaches, short-term memory impacts. There's the risk of cancer. You may know that Pennsylvania is a hotspot for a few different rare cancers, and we have more than one cancer cluster in the state. We've had studies and investigations into if fracking is connected to that because of the high amount of fracking in the state. And data centers would go right along in line with that and contribute to those things. In addition, there's risk of low birth weight, preterm births, and other adverse birth outcomes. Here's a little bit more, and you'll see a lot of these pollutants, although they are different pollutants, have similar symptoms and impacts, so they can compound each other as well. So you can get heart disease from exposure to nitrogen oxides. You can have respiratory irritation from volatile organic compounds. These are typically known as Vox, Nox, and SOx, colloquially, and they come with air pollution from data centers and related data center power plants. So that's the air impacts. We're going to talk about water impacts really quickly. Uh, Data centers are one of the top 10 water consuming um, industries in the country. And this is the projection of where we're going to end up with our data center water usage. So they're already a really heavy water using industry, but we haven't seen data centers being built and proposed at scale until recently. Data center water consumption is almost entirely driven by AI at this point and is likely to exceed in maybe 2 years or so a 2 to 4 times the amount from just a couple of years ago. We have the direct use from servers and cooling of the equipment in the data center, and then we have the indirect use behind electricity generation. The other issue with data centers is that they love potable water, which it translates to your drinking water. Water supplies for direct use include potable water, treated effluent, or reclaimed and recycled water, but on average, alternative water sources, so something that's not your well water or a water source that's a drinking water, is only less than 5%. And the reason is the impact to their equipment. It's expensive for them to use something that's not potable water because it degrades the equipment that it's cooling. And so they have to replace it more frequently, and it's less it's just less profitable to them. They use it in their cooling towers, they use it in their condensers and heat exchangers, and a lot of it, after it's used to cool, is heated up and then discharged back into the water source or evaporated off from the heat. So, depending on where they're discharging it, you can then have risk of pollution from it going through the equipment and picking up the various greases and chemicals they use in the equipment. And, they would then treat it or filter it, depending on what the claims are of the developer, and then discharge it. So you also have the risk of the heat impacting the river or whatever area it's being discharged to, having a thermal impact where the temperature of the water goes up and is not safe for the fish or whatever else might be impacted by that. Um, so data centers in the red here, that's what they use for cooling their equipment. And it's a lot of water. It's this is in billions of liters here on the side. But from the electricity generation, so this goes all the way down to like uh injection wells for fracking, um, power plants, uh, both nuclear and gas fired. The electricity generation itself is so much more than the incredible amount already used by the data centers. If you use ChatGPT to generate an email, on average, it uses about a bottle of water to make one email. These are a little bit older in numbers. I need to find new numbers, but these ones are like the most like statistically significant we have right now. Per megawatt hour of electricity, 11 over 11,000 gallons of water is used. And in 2020, the electric power sector for the country used 47.5 trillion gallons of water. We've been hearing different developers propose how many gallons of water they're going to use a day. An example would be the Wildcat hyperscale data center proposed for Archbald. I went to one of their conditional use hearings recently, and they said it would use on the hot days in the summer upwards of 3.3 million gallons of water a day just for cooling the facility. And now the folks in Archbald are hearing rumors of an additional power plant that they want to build for the data centers up there. Now let's backtrack a little bit and talk about where is this data center boom coming from. So there are many data centers already in the state of Pennsylvania, but for the most part, they are small, they are not intrusive, and they are even directly in towns. An example of one that's near me in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, there's a little data center that is right downtown. It's also an office building, and it provides local cell phone and internet services to the community there. It's not noisy or disruptive. It's like a 5 to 10 megawatt data center. The data centers that we are seeing proposed now across the state and that are making the news are hyperscale data centers. And what that means is they are whole campuses, 16 buildings in some cases. There's one that is twice the size of a town being built in Louisiana. And they uh, are being built to uh, um, uh, house servers that use energy hungry AI algorithms. AI is an umbrella term that is used, but what we're specifically talking about when we're talking about the technology that's kind of causing this boom, we're talking about large language models, generative AI. So the ones that produce content rather than something like a robot vacuum that makes a map of your house. Sometimes people call that AI as well, but it's a different technology. So when you hear people talking about AI, it's important to ask them to specify, is this a generative AI, one that makes images or words? And that's what we're talking about here. Large language models are very energy inefficient and they run hot and uh, they are poised to drive data center power demand up by 160% by 2030. And with the other issues that we have with AI, the risks of job loss from automation, privacy violations that you have maybe heard about, the copyright infringement from it taking all of that information in from the internet, um, surveillance and racist algorithms to do that calculated surveillance. Market volatility, you may have heard in the news about people blaming AI for weapons and bombings, and the generative AI that is colloquially called AI slop. Because of all of those things, folks tend not to trust it, and most Americans think that AI won't improve their lives. So that's one of the reasons that we are seeing such a bipartisan resistance and reaction to these things trying to be built across the country. The other thing is you are going to be paying for it now and paying for it later because of the way our state is set up to attract these developers to the state. So here we have the estimated um, the estimated projection of how much electricity data centers will need. Um, and you'll see that it's had a fairly typical, like as people use more electricity, this follows the same trend line. And now it's looking at exploding. This projection is a really wide margin. And the reason is we are seeing multiple interconnectivity requests and multiple data centers being thrown at the same community because they're trying to see what's going to stick. But the issue with that is those proposals go into account when PJM calculates how much electricity they're going to want to buy from the producers, and that then goes into your rates because they're estimating how much infrastructure they're going to have to build and how much supply they're going to have to provide. So if your rates are increasing, the market monitor that was independent and was checking out on PJM, which is our Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland grid, has already said that data centers are a contributing factor for your rising rates. This is an example of a rate from a bill of a local resident. This was January. And if you look at their 2025 electricity usage, they used more electricity. This person has electric heat, so they use quite a bit of electricity in the winter. But they used 11% less electricity this January than they did the year before. However, if you look at how much per day they were paying, they went from $12 to $22 and had a 76% increase in their cost, even though they were using less electricity. And even the average temperature between the years was warmer. And this is an article from PPL's website that came out this year that was saying winter bills straining your budget. here's some seasonal saving suggestions, like winterizing your windows and all of that kind of stuff. There's 42 comments on this, and I took some snapshots. Every single comment on there was negative, and every single comment was a person saying, "Help. Why is my bill so high? I'm doing everything I can to not let it be high. This is crazy. I've never seen it like this. I've been in the same house for 16 years. Why is the price increasing so much?" And an independent market monitor said that data centers, even though we don't have them built yet, are contributing to this. So that's paying for it now and paying for it later. We are seeing that data center tax breaks are supposed to cost the state billions in revenue, especially because the proposed facilities don't have a ton of jobs. A data center, after it's built, typically provides, 15 to 30 jobs, depending on the size of it. So around 20 jobs. You could get a restaurant in an Olive Garden or something built in your community, and it would provide more employment than a data center. Um, we have had a tax break for data center equipment since 2021. And fossil fuel projects, again, all of these proposed gas-fired power plants across the state for these things, as well as proposed modular nuclear reactors, which are an untested technology that are not regulated, um, are really expensive to build and frequently get tax breaks, as well as LRTAs, which is the local tax relief on your property taxes. So you pay for it through your taxes and you pay for it through your electric bills. For a technology that isn't benefiting us, it's benefiting the billionaires that are um, profiting off the surveillance, the advertising, and the marketing that these things are being used for. So, what can we do? I'm going to pass it to Matt Shara to talk a little bit about ordinances, zoning, and the municipal strategies we can use to push back against these things.
Thank you, Josephine. I'm Matra. I'm the Policy and Program Coordinator for PSRPA based in Southwestern PA. I will preface by saying I am not a lawyer. So if you have specific legal questions, definitely consult a lawyer, or we can give you some resources that we have sent to other communities, legal resources, but definitely not a lawyer. If you want to go to the next slide. So I'm some of this might be basic, some of this you might already know. Um, we're going to cover what are ordinances, what are resolutions, what are zoning ordinances. Those are all different things. They they act differently, they're passed a little bit differently. You're all a township, I believe. Most of this is the same for townships, boroughs, and cities, smaller cities. So this could be applied in any community where there are data center proposals. So an ordinance, many of you may know, that is the local law that your community follows. It only applies to the specific community that it was passed in. So you can think of this as like the law that says you can't have your grass so high or you have to clean up after your dog. It's all a general ordinance. Those are all general ordinances. They're passed by your township supervisors or your council. It's applicable within that municipality, applying to residents, property owners, businesses, and it could create local penalties and requirements. So think those code violations or parking tickets that you would get. There are zoning laws, which again are in a different bucket, and then things like noise limits, property maintenance standards, public health protections. Those are all things that apply to businesses and to residents. Next slide. A resolution is a little bit different. We put this in here because we had some communities that weren't successful in getting their councils to talk about ordinances, and they were like, well, what about a resolution? And resolutions are nice, but they don't have a force of law. So a resolution is basically like a letter that would express the feelings of that municipality, like a formal stance. So a council can pass that and say, we are opposed to data centers. We're passing a resolution saying this, but there's no force of law behind it, and it's just basically some nice words on paper. It's sometimes good for getting press attention if you get a council to pass a resolution, but in the long term, it does not really have a lot of force to it. Next slide. Um, in general, in a borough, township, and city, an ordinance is passed by introducing it at a public meeting. The public should have the opportunity to ask questions during public comment about the ordinance. And then after what is called the first passage or the first reading, they have to put out a public notice, usually in a local newspaper or a law journal, saying that they're considering this particular ordinance. And that usually has to sit for, I think it's 30 days. And then they would have what's called a second reading. And that typically happens at a regular council meeting the following month. And again, that would be on the agenda. Residents would have the ability to comment on and ask questions on that agenda item when the ordinance is up. And then at the second meeting, if it passes, then that ordinance is signed into law. Ordinances cannot supersede state law. So state law will set like a bare minimum. Ordinances can be more stringent than state law. Sometimes there are exemptions, but if there's anything that contradicts a state law, the state law wins. And same with federal law. Federal law wins over state and local law. Ordinances can be changed. So, if you pass something and 2 months later you're like, you know what, this isn't working, it could be amended. And the amendment process is pretty much the same. You as residents, you can challenge ordinances through public comments. You could also challenge ordinances through court action. Typically, that's the county court or the Commonwealth Court. Next. So a zoning ordinance is a little bit different because it is more specific, it is more detailed. It is governed by the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code, the MPC, which is amended from time to time by the state legislature. And the MPC, through zoning, it allows municipalities to divide the land up, decide where things go. Residential, commercial, industrial, and there's all of the subsections of each of those. It controls things like building height, setback, density. It can require site plans, special exceptions, create zoning hearing boards, which zoning hearing boards, they lead the process of challenges to the zoning law or any changes that need to be made for properties. And then that is basically a quasi-judicial board. So it operates like a court. It doesn't operate the same way as a normal council meeting would. And then zoning decisions are bound by law and they can only be challenged in court. A municipality, so township supervisors cannot change what their zoning hearing board decides. Those are two separate bodies. There are some instances where municipalities might not have a zoning hearing board, and then by default, the township supervisors may act as a zoning hearing board, but those are still basically the same people on two completely separate bodies. It can get kind of confusing and stressful to navigate through zoning, but it's very important when it comes to data centers to understand and to know that this is important to have these guardrails up. Next slide. So zoning ordinance cannot conflict with state or federal law. They cannot be discriminatory. You can't say, we are going to zone something so that it cannot exist. You will get sued. Think of back in the 1960s with redlining, that was all of the things that had to do with zoning back then. It's still the same. You cannot have discriminatory zoning. And then certain industries like oil and gas are shaped by state law, and state law dictates how municipalities handle oil and gas decisions. Next slide. So there's something called a curative amendment, and that is a legal challenge to a town zoning law. We've seen that in other municipalities. So I know, like up in Luzerne County in Hollenbach Township, there was a developer that encouraged some residents to uh, put forth a curative amendment, but any resident who is a property owner who has an interest in the community, and even technically township supervisors themselves, can put forth a curative amendment, which is a challenge to the zoning law that basically says this law is not up up to date. It does not include all of the potential industries, and we need to fix it. This kind of forces their hand to fix it. Um, if if zoning doesn't allow a certain use, that's being exclusionary, and it could violate property rights, and it could act unconstitutionally. And then if it's found invalid, again, the town may be forced to change the zoning law, and that would lead to a developer moving forward with their project. So if a zoning law is not up to date and a data center developer comes in and says you are not up to date with your zoning law, it's violating the MPC, and that is found to be the case, then that would push that project through, and it ultimately takes control away from the municipality and from residents. So you always want to make sure that your zoning laws are up to date. I know that there are some municipalities out there that have not updated them in 20 plus years. So this is one of those things that people think, oh, it's not important, it's expensive, it's very in the weeds, how much could possibly change? But zoning laws can be very detailed, and so you want to make sure that it's all accurate and up to date. Next slide. So here's where we come to standard, what you think of as an ordinance in a municipality, what I'm calling a quality of life ordinance. So these come from the general police powers that exist in municipalities in Pennsylvania. Municipalities, townships, boroughs, cities, they have the right to protect the well-being and quality of life of the residents. That is their main duty, is to make your life safe living in that community. So this comes from the borough code, the township code, the city code, whatever municipality type you happen to be in. It allows them to protect public health, public safety, property maintenance, and nuisance conditions. So again, think of a code enforcement officer telling you to cut your grass or take care of your dog or paint your windows or any of those things. That's the same kind of ordinance. So you can use these quality of life ordinances to protect the community from not just data centers, but from any industry that is coming in. By passing a quality of life ordinance, you're setting standards to say, if you come here, you have to follow these guidelines because we have high expectations. Now, if the developer doesn't want to follow the guidelines, then that is a whole other conversation. But this is setting the standard, the expectation. The caveat is you cannot just target data centers for an ordinance like this. It has to be fair across the board. So whatever you pass would count for any property owner, residential, commercial, industrial, doesn't matter. Next slide. So here's just some differences between zoning ordinances and quality of life ordinances. So a zoning issue could ask, can a warehouse be built in a residential district? And that's decided under the municipality's planning code. The quality of life question is the warehouse causing excessive noise, dust, truck idling, traffic, any of that kind of thing? That is what's addressed through nuisance, noise, or property maintenance ordinances. So this is kind of a fail-safe to say, if you get a data center or some sort of development that could cause quality of life issues, an ordinance like this protects the community and puts safeguards up and also puts penalties up for those properties that could be causing harm. Next. Again, this is how they can help. You can set noise levels. You can limit hours for the generator testing that we were talking about earlier. Regulate light. Light pollution is a really big problem from data centers, especially if you live in a rural community where you're used to having dark skies. Um, Vibration, dust control, not just during construction, but also just from truck traffic or any other kind of normal operations. Um, Odors and emissions, any of those things that would disrupt your health and safety. And this protects your respiratory health, your sleep, your mental health. Also, property values. This is one of the things that people don't really think about much. And it's not, it shouldn't be the top of the list because, public health should be the top of the list. But things like this also impact property values and neighborhood stability. And then also, what if the data center does come in and builds a warehouse and then decides last minute, you know what, we're not going to do this? Then you have an abandoned warehouse. Then what? So it's important to put all of these safeguards in place. Next. Some legal boundaries. Um, Again, you cannot ban a use, so you cannot pass an ordinance that says we ban data centers in this municipality. That's going to easily get challenged in court. And it also cannot conflict with state or federal environmental laws. And the big thing here is it has to be reasonable and enforceable. So if you just say um, you cannot exceed or you cannot test generators after 10 p.m. In any district because it disrupts the sleep and quality of life of residents. And if you do, there is a fine of $1,000 for every instance. That's reasonable. But you can't say you can never test generators at any time, and there's an astronomical fine if you do. The MPC and the courts have rulings that stop municipalities from doing that. But you can make it really, really inconvenient for offenders, for sure. They also can require operational standards that reduce harm. So if zoning does allow a data center, quality of life ordinance again can require those regulations to keep it as minimal of a disruptor as possible. Next slide. Um, these only set boundaries for the municipality, as I said earlier. It has to set them for all industries evenly. And again, if you're going to develop here, here are the expectations we have, and you have to follow them. If they choose to pull a proposal and go somewhere else or leave entirely, then that's their problem, that they don't want to follow the standards that you're setting for your municipality. And again, like this, not just for data centers, but this is something really that every municipality should have on the books, even just a bare minimum, just to protect residents. Next. So here's some things you can keep doing. I'm sure some of you are doing all of this already. Keep attending your meetings. It's super important to attend as many of your council meetings and zoning meetings as possible. Share those meeting dates and times with each other. If they're live streamed, even better. If they're not, maybe one of you will live stream it and share it with each other. It is permissible for you to live stream a public meeting. They cannot legally stop you because it is a public meeting. You should also pay attention to any kind of notices if they're asking for formal public comment. Keep an eye out for deadlines, especially with when it comes to zoning. If you end up providing testimony for a zoning board, you want to keep that testimony very pointed and concise. Definitely request public documents, either through the right to know process, or even if you have a good relationship with the township supervisor or a secretary or something, ask first. because it is a burden for an office to produce the documents for a right to know. Forge a relationship first and try to ask for those documents. And if you don't get a satisfactory answer, then definitely file a right to know. They would typically give you at least 30 days. Probably they usually extend ask for an extension, and it's up to 30 days. Um, I saw a thing in the chat. Yeah, so that is absolutely typical with any industry. In the chat about companies building fines in, we see that a lot. I live in a community in southwestern PA that has a really big um, coke works for steel, and they're constantly fined, and they pay the fine and they keep doing their thing. Um, yeah, it is very frustrating, but it's still really important to try to do whatever we can to put up these enforceable regulations. But a lot of times they do end up paying the fines. And I will say municipal fines are very low. They're usually like $1,000. Municipalities can't make local fines very high. So they would absolutely be able to pay the fine. But I think when it comes to this, what you're doing is you're creating a timeline of abuses, basically, like as you would do, like if you were having an issue and you had to call the police and you were filing a report and you're like, I'm just going to file this report to create a timeline in case something happens again. It's kind of like that, where you can say, okay, this company got fined on this day and this day and this day for these different things. You're creating a story with that for hopefully future action at a higher level. Um, and then, yeah, go to council meetings, ask questions. And if you really want to get involved, join some boards and commissions. Join the zoning board, the planning commission, run for supervisor. Um, there are a lot of local positions that go on uncontested, and people just sit in them for a really long time. And there are a lot of resources out there for local candidates for office to learn about what those offices should be doing and how they function. There's a lot of good seminars that go out from nonpartisan groups about how local government should work effectively. And so there's a lot that you can do, but right now you're I can already tell you're involved. So kudos to you all for doing this and fighting this. We're seeing this a lot across the state, and it's really heartening to see so many folks coming together to push back for their communities. And it is really important that we stand up and say no and protect municipal rights, because there are state laws that are trying to erode municipal laws as well, especially when it comes to data centers. And I think it's really important for municipalities to have a say. If you want a data center in your community, I don't agree with you, but great, that's your choice. But if you don't, you should not be forced into that decision by anyone else. It should be the community's decision. And that goes with any industry, frankly. So kudos to you all. Happy to answer any questions. And I will also drop my email in the chat. If you think of anything later for specific questions or how we can connect you to resources or anything. But I'll pass it back to Josephine.
Thanks, Matt. Awesome. We're going to move into the Q&A portion now. A couple things first. So you can go to psrpa.org/data center for a little bit more information. There's a map on there that shows all of the proposed data center projects across the state. So check where your friends and family are and make sure they're aware if there's something proposed near them. Check out your location and see how many may be proposed near you, some that you may not have not even heard about. There's also a sign on there for you to contact your senators and tell them to support the proposed 3-year moratorium that has been talked about. Ask them to co-sponsor the moratorium because it's not legislation that's been put forth yet, so we're still waiting to see the final written version of it. Um, and Currently, there is a House Bill 2151, that we recommend you call your representatives in the House and tell them to vote no on it because it would insert a um, a it's not a default, but it's a proposed.
Oh,
Go ahead,
go
Matt.
ahead, Matt. May I? It would authorize the state local government commission to draft a baseline ordinance for municipalities, and it would put it in the municipalities planning code, which we have concerns about because one, that has not been done for any other industry, so it opens the door for the state to do it for future industries. But also, we have concerns that even though it's not the Department of Community and Economic Development doing it anymore, the fact that the state is attracting data centers, but also trying to write standards to protect communities against data centers, we feel it's a conflict of interest and it's disingenuous. And we're concerned that they will come up with a baseline ordinance that municipalities might feel obligated to pass because it's the state. So they're just going to be like, okay, this is easy. We'll just do this. And we're worried that if municipalities pass something more stringent, then developers might sue municipalities and use this law as a justification because they are going to look at the state standard as being the end all be all. So we just have a lot of concerns with it. And yeah, I will drop some info in the chat about that as well.
Thank you so much for explaining that. Way better than me, Matt. Very appreciated. And we will be sharing some information and resources in the chat as we talk here in the Q&A, which is the rest of the time here is dedicated for. I've allotted till 8:30, but yeah, we'll see where this leads us tonight. And uh, all of the stuff that we share here tonight, we will also share in a follow-up email afterwards, so you have access to those resources. And again, this is being recorded, and we will share the recording out for folks to share, and we'll be posting it on social media, so you have access to it there. The first thing I want Matt to put in the chat, if you have it up, is we have model ordinances. And again, these are examples. They're supposed to be customized and they're just suggestions. And you can bring these to your township and say, we want something like this passed to help protect our communities. Again, they don't exclude data centers since that's not legal. What it does is they create standards that are high but defensible, which may deter the developers because a lot of them are just out here doing land grabs, and it's grifters attracting grifters across the state as they're trying to figure out if they can hop on this AI bubble and make a buck. I also want to say we have model quality of life ordinances that Matt wrote, and then we have. I like to recommend Food and Water Watch's zoning ordinance because in that one, they have put in a recommendation of a 2,500-foot setback from data center facilities. And you may be seeing some proposed locally much closer, like 400 feet. And in Salem Township, for example, it's a 75-foot setback from homes that they have approved. So I'm going to just pause there and feel free to put questions in the chat or raise your hand and come off mute, whatever you're more comfortable doing. Welcome, Danielle. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for being here. I'm wondering, do you know if we currently have any quality of life ordinances around this issue in our township specifically, and if the township is making any strides to take for this? My other concern is just townships have very few employees currently in them, I feel like, especially per position. So I'm wondering around that, like, have they, I don't know, is there any benefits that they're I don't know the right words. I'm like, is there any benefits that they're going to try to push for these AI centers to go in that's like ultimately going to help like the township on some end? I'm just concerned about why they might potentially not want to hear us out as like a community or I don't know, be like bought out or whatever there's probably a bunch of reasons, but
Yeah, thank you. That reminds me that I need to turn it over to Tara and Chrissy, if they are on, to talk a little bit about the specific proposal in Limerick Township, and what you know, and where you're currently at as far as the process with the township.
Yep. Um, so hi, I'm Chrissy. I guess so what specifics so I guess the biggest, do you want me to do the announcements, Josephine? Is that what you want, or just kind of reminders of things to do?
No, we can save that for the end. I was
Okay.
thinking just where you're at currently,
Yep,
with the Limerick
got it.
Township proposal.
Yep, got it. Okay, so in Limerick, we had two ordinances that were passed in 2024 in June and November. And so those ordinances created zoning and an overlay for two sites in Limerick Township specifically, where the board at the time felt that were appropriate sites for data centers to go that were industrial, limited light industrial zoning. So we have currently one active application in, and that site is located between the Philadelphia outlets and the power plant. And so it's 192 acres. The proposal is for 8 buildings that are up to between 85 and 100 feet tall. In the application, it lists both. So I'm curious if that'll come out in the planning commission meeting. So it's 8 buildings up to 100 feet tall, 1.4 million square feet on the land, but a total of 2.8 million square feet, like including like vertically. So they're saying that the buildings are 2 stories tall, but like as we think of buildings, they're like 10 stories tall, right? Because they could be up to 100 feet tall. Some of the buildings will have ratio generators, some 36. There's generator fields next to each building. So it's definitely close to like between 250 and 300 range. I actually miscalculated that because I thought it was 36 per building, and some of them do have 42. So it's actually more than the 288 that we've been sharing with folks. And it says their ask for water was 1.5 to 1.75 million gallons of water per day. And it's going to have a substation on it, uh, power requirements. Oh, someone's took it off mute, so it's echoing. Power requirements for 750 megawatts. So just to like give you some like thoughts of it, like square footage and size wise, the King of Prussia Mall is 2.9 million square feet. So this is proposed for the land taking up 1.4 million square feet, and with the height, it's the same actual building amount as the King of Prussia Mall, but it's taller because the average height of buildings at the King of Prussia Mall are like 30 to 40, because I looked this up. So again, it's taller because the ordinance that's in place, the maximum height is 120 feet for data centers. So I don't know if they feel like they're coming under, and that's a positive, if they stick to that 100 or even 85. Yeah, so those are the specs of it. And the power usage too, I just want to touch on to frame it. Like 750 megawatts is the same amount of energy that would be used to power like 500,000 homes. So it's a ton of energy. So those are so where we are in so those are like the main stats of the project itself. And then we are at a place where coming up, we have two really big meetings coming up where for this application. On April 9th is the Planning Commission meeting. And so, and I'm sure most of you know where that is. It's at the Ninth Grade Center in Springford. It's at 6:30. And at that meeting is when the Planning Commission is going to decide if they approve with conditions, deny, or I guess they technically also, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, I think they can also kind of postpone or say, you need to come back with more information with that application. So that's on April 9th. We'll see what happens then. That'll be really good. We really want a big turnout at those meetings to show that we care, right? And we're red so that we're in solidarity together. But also, it'll be interesting to see what the developer says. Like, that's when we'll get these specifics on the project and the things that they're highlighting. So that's on April 9th. And then on April 14th, just 5 short days later, is the first conditional use hearing. So for this application. So that is when people can, again, we want to have a really big turnout there. And that'll be like the first, my understanding is of several, possibly many conditional use hearings following that, where they hear out the developer and they talk about, all those different things within the conditional use. So the meeting on the 9th is at the Springford Ninth Grade Center. So that's 400 South Lewis Road. So if you just Google Springford Ninth Grade Center, it's at that building in their auditorium. And I should say before each of those meetings in April, I'm kind of giving the announcements now. I'm sorry, Josephine, just because
No, no,
it's
no.
relevant.
Keep going. You're doing great.
Yeah. Yeah. So those meetings we are having just like a gathering on the sidewalk beforehand at 5:30 to 6:30 beforehand just to engage people because there's still a lot of people that don't know this is happening. So just to hold signs, hopefully we'll get some maybe a little press attention from that so that we can get the awareness out there because it also is just making people aware this is happening because believe me, we've talked to people that live quite close to the site and didn't even know. So that is a thing. So I think that's where we're at. So we have one application in. We're anticipating a second application because there's a second site in our data center overlay next to the state game lands. So that will come at some point. And also the other thing is our board voted to amend the ordinances to try to make them more protective. So that is currently in the works. And then once that draft becomes available, my understanding is the township will post it to their website. So then we'll be able to, the public will be able to review it. And then they will have a hearing or a meeting, I should say, um, that you can go in public comment on it. So I think that's like kind of where we're at with this active application. I hope that made sense. I
No,
talk really fast.
this is really helpful. Thank you. Because honestly,
Yeah,
until this meeting was put on, me and my husband weren't aware that this was potentially happening, and we're very, very
great.
close to the site. So it's scary and concerning, and
Yeah,
for health reasons. So there's, I mean, all the reasons you mentioned above, but also very concerned about even like the water usage. Like I think about the
oh,
months
yeah,
of summer when we are in a drought and we're like potentially running out of drinking water, but like they're using it for a huge
yeah,
building that.
yeah, yeah. And the noise for me, I'm quite close to it as well, sandwiched between the two sites actually. And the noise is really a concern. All of the slides that you showed with all of the impacts from the noise and the vibrations and things, like it's a lot.
I wonder if there's any way that you could add, there's one of those like big billboards that has the electronic screens on it at the top. You might even have it already like in motion, but at the top of like right across from Costco, because I'm in like the Ryan Homes development right down the street, but they have that
Yep.
and sometimes have like community events that are happening because it could bring more awareness to like all the people that drive past there. Potentially if you could have
Hmm.
that, I don't know who's in charge of that billboard, but
Yeah. We'd have to see who owns it, but that's a great idea to get the awareness. It really is like seeing that message over and over again out in the community to bring that awareness. That's a great idea.
Yeah, I'll add that we don't have them yet because we have to get them delivered to you all, but we have data
Oh,
center
science.
yard signs that just say no data center. That big yellow thing at the end was our proof for yard signs. And I live up in the Poconos, and so we'll arrange a drop off soon from somebody at PSRPA to Tara or Chrissy or someone else in the community so that we can get you started with a few of those to get some visibility out. But definitely reach out to your local businesses that might be willing to post something about it on their windows or contact the billboard owner. And if they're local, potentially they'll give you a discount. You could start, a fund. I think that's something that you wanted to announce too, right, Chrissy? Um, like a GoFundMe or something. You're on mute.
Have a fun. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have a fund going to try to raise money for legal defense, like a legal defense fund. And that also would be used for printing too, for marketing and things, because we've been trying to piece together, printing to cover printing costs. But as we all know, printing can be expensive. So that's another thing too. So I can link up our stuff, or I can send that to Josephine if you do a recap and those types of things afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. I will be sending out a recap. So also anything you put in the chat, Chrissy, that folks can look at now, I'll be having that text automatically saved to my computer and I can include it in
Oh, right, right, right.
the
Okay.
recap for everybody. Before we
Okay.
take another question, Matt, and if you don't want, I can take a crack at it, but would you explain what a conditional use hearing is so folks kind of understand what's coming up for them and what they can do? Because I've been to a few of them, but sometimes they're really spicy and really helpful.
That is, zoning is like my weakest thing to explain. So if you, I can help fill in the gaps, but if you could tackle it.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah, I'm happy.
So, the reason that you're having a conditional use hearing is the way your zoning ordinance is set up is that when a developer that's a data center, or depending on, I haven't read your full zoning ordinance, it could be any in particular industrial zones, but in this case, at least the developer that's for the data center, it's a conditional use application. So they don't automatically just get to be built, which is good because then you have this process with community input. A conditional use hearing is where the data center developers will bring expert witnesses and testify to the community. It's a public meeting that you all can attend. That's the one that Chrissy said's coming up. And then your township supervisors will be there and they'll have their own folks, and they will be asking questions of the developers. And the developers are there to make their case for why this thing should be built. So often at these conditional use hearings, there's public comment, depending on how many of them there are. Sometimes public comment is at the last one, sometimes it's piecemeal for all of them. I've seen it both ways. But you want to come armed with testimony about what your concerns are. And if you have like the sources to back up what you're saying, you can also like offer your testimony and then email it to your township afterward with your sources about why you're worried about diesel pollution, why you're worried about the noise and vibrations. And again, when we send out the follow-up, I will have a bunch of resources for you to get started with if you want to look at it. Um, uh, you also want to ask questions. I don't know in your case if they will be allowing like uh cross examination where you can ask them questions. But I went to a hearing in Archbald for one of the proposed data centers up there, and they did allow the residents there who had representation to and standing, which Matt, if you want to talk about standing a little bit, th they can they were able allowed to ask questions of the developer.
Yeah, so with standing, it's done a little differently with each community too, but basically, um, when they have these hearings, the board decides who can testify. So to have standing, like, are you going to be affected directly by these changes? So do you uh, own an adjoining property? Do you live near it? How directly affected will you be? Some communities are just like, you're in the community, you're close enough, we'll let you have standing. Other communities are like, you don't live so many feet away from it, so you can't speak. So it really is gonna depend. I don't know if they set, I don't know if they set out those standards yet for you, but I would think that the board should say, in order to have standing, here's what we need from you. There should be some sort of like stipulation put out by the board at some point. And that's usually done at the first one. So it's really important for you to have any kind of data. And we're happy to help when it comes to health data or anything like that to direct you. And this is where I think I mentioned earlier, for your comments. Yeah, in the chat, if you're concerned about air quality and asthma, and like talk about your health concerns. If you live really close and you already have underlying conditions, talking about your health concerns to the extent that you're comfortable is absolutely fine. Um, I think storytelling is really impactful for these kinds of things. Like, be human about it. Talk about like your kids, your pets, your land value, like anything that you think is important and worth telling. Telling a story is important. Data is useful. You want to keep the testimony succinct. Um, don't don't overspeak, like if they say 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever, try to keep it succinct, to the point, stay on topic, stay professional, all of that. Like, it's a quasi court setting. And I've even seen communities where if you end up knowing who's getting standing and you know each other, And let's say, this person, that they have asthma, and that this other person is concerned about their water, and this other person is concerned about this. You can all coordinate and paint an entire big picture with your testimony and kind of piggyback off of each other, so that you're not, recreating the wheel. Like you can just go one after another and kind of continue each other's stories. So you could really coordinate on it very well. I've seen that a lot. But yeah, we're happy to help. Even if you just draft something and you want an extra set of eyes to look at it, for your testimony, we're happy to do that too.
Thanks so much, Matt. I see a few questions in the chat, so I'm gonna tr read those and answer those. So I saw a question from DK that says this would obviously affect home value significantly, correct? It's actually not quite clear yet. It depends on the state. So the housing data that we have is from Virginia, which is again known as Data Center Alley because of how many they have built and proposed. Um, what we can say is we've seen it where if a data center gets built, it's so disruptive to the neighboring homes that folks leave and then sell, and then another data center gets built where the folks sold, and then the neighbors to that one leave, and it's sort of like a domino effect. And there's whole communities that have been almost entirely replaced by data centers in Loudoun County, Virginia. So not necessarily. It might not lower your property value if a data center is there to buy it, but depending on zoning, if it's a residential area and a data center is not going to build there, but build right up against it, I would think that that would really threaten your property value because you wouldn't be able to sell it to another resident. And then I saw a question. Is there any county in Pennsylvania has been very successful in keeping them out? So this is still new, but we have seen some initial successes I'm very excited to share, and they are with folks we've been collaborating with. So I'll start with Luzerne County. Luzerne County is doing a couple of things. The county itself is drafting an ordinance for any of the municipalities that have deferred their zoning to the county because they're so small or for whatever reason. And the draft that they have out is looking really strong. They've taken a lot of recommendations from groups that have brought forward concerns like we're sharing tonight. Um, and Hazel Township voted to reject the application for that data center. It's now tied up in court because likely when the developers lose, they will appeal. But that's great. That right there stopped it. They were cutting down trees and like fast tracking and halted because that was voted down. In Lackawanna County, like I said, Archibald has six proposed. On Friday last week, the first one that came up for conditional use was denied. And again, that's probably going to go to court. We or like be appealed. We haven't seen yet, but that was a huge win. And the folks in Archibald, what's interesting is they had a borough council that wasn't super supportive. They put in this really problematic overlay, which is why they have six proposed for that one town, because it just put in a lot of space for these. And like I said in my presentation, over 1,000 diesel generators that if there's some power outage could all kick on and just choke out the valley that they're in. Those folks voted out the council members that supported that and got folks that were opposed to the data centers elected. And then recently they got the council to then remove the other three from power that were still in the council that were pro data center or more supportive to the developers. And then the council turned around and voted no on the most recent permit. So they did a lot of work to put pressure on their council. And they had, I mean, like it sounds like, and again, we can talk about this a bit more, but it sounds like your township is trying to put in a protective ordinance and address what's going on. Because like we said, we're not passing ordinances and zoning ordinances that are banning data centers, although we are absolutely at PSRPA in support of the 3-year moratorium that has been talked about at the state, because that would give municipalities and the state time to put in appropriate regulations, since this is a Wild West kind of new industry that's popped up for AI. I hope those answered the questions in the chat. Isn't there a bill in Harrisburg proposed that any data centers built would not increase your water or electric bill? I will turn that one to Matt.
I'm checking my spreadsheet, so hold, please.
He has a full-on bill tracker for all of the data center related bills that are proposed. And there's several of them. I think when I talked with someone yesterday and we checked, it was like 20 some proposed right now.
There is one that's the Ratepayer Protection Act. I don't know if that, I think there might be one. Um, yeah, Ratepayer Protection Act, I think is the one that you're talking about. So I'll just drop that in the chat. That's House Bill 2156. Um, if you feel like reading the whole thing, it's only 7 pages long, so it's not the worst bill. But yeah, it would basically um, it would provide like municipal purchasing power and allow municipalities to like kind of share electric load and aggregate it and like try to cap um, some of those costs. Um, and it's definitely a start. So, and residents can opt in or out. I think we had some concerns about the bill and just like how they could opt in or out, but overall, like I'm pretty sure we ended up supporting this bill. Yeah, go ahead.
It sounds reassuring, but there's oh, Oh, okay. I'm not echoing anymore. I'm like, it sounds reassuring that there is some like progress happening for other areas, so that is hopeful. I'm wondering if there's anything around like the environmental rights amendment, specifically with Article 1, Section 27, with the clean air and pure water, because it does sound like although they are doing a lot to try to like keep the water clean, there is a lot of uh, I don't know, environmental problems and whatnot around that. So I'm like wondering if that's something that we would be able to go after as well.
So it's like sometimes Harrisburg, I think, likes to pretend that that amendment doesn't exist. Um, for those of you that might not know, I will drop the language in the chat, but it basically says that all Pennsylvanians have a right to clean air, pure water, and the aesthetic value of the environment of Pennsylvania. And like, it's 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 used sometimes, and we certainly use it when we write letters and things like that, but it's like they kind of forget, and they should be using it. Yeah, it's in the PA Constitution. And New York just passed a similar one back in 2022. So yeah, I wish they would use it more, because if they would use it, none of this would be a conversation. We wouldn't have this meeting right now. So yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you for bringing that
That
up.
sounds contradictory.
Yeah. Oh, and in the chat about air traffic control, I hadn't even thought of that. So definitely would love to dig into that because, yeah, uh, good question. I have no idea. That's never come up before. So we should definitely chat about that one. Because that is a very valid question. Um, yeah, I have no idea. But um, my email is in the chat. So if any of you have any specific questions like that that don't get answered tonight, definitely email me. Or if you have Josephine's email, email her as well. Um, and yeah, fault lines. We talked about that a little bit. Um, when it comes to like the vibrations, um, if you add in any kind of fracking that's happening or that has happened, abandoned coal mines, abandoned wells, any of that, you already have a risk. You know, the ground is Swiss cheese basically. So any kind of vibration could weaken So that's also worth keeping in mind. I don't know. I assume like in your area there has been like historically coal mining, especially, and other types of industries. So ground is likely weak in the first place. And throw in all of the crazy storms that we've been having with all of the rain and flooding that's also weakening the ground. Um, I think that all of that, like, the problem is that we don't know, like, long term what some of these places are going to do. Did you have another question?
I
I
do. I have
do.
so
I
many
have so many
questions.
questions. It's fine. I will
Um,
try.
Thank you. I
Thank you. I
appreciate it.
appreciate it.
One of the
One
other
of the
things I
other
was
things.
thinking about is like with the underground railroad that we had in this area. And I feel like this originally, specifically across from the Limerick outlets, was proposed by the original builder that bought the grounds to become like a bunch of homes. And from my understanding, there was an article that came out that they decided not to proceed in that direction because they got so much flack because there was a lot of people that were buried. So it became like sacred ground in like right where they're probably putting in the plant. So I'm just and they were trying, the builder was trying to like basically move the bodies, like dig them up
Oh,
and move them essentially. So I'm wondering if that potentially could help us because it's like secret, I don't know, it's a burial site over there. Oh, you're on mute.
I would bring it up for sure. People really don't like having to relocate cemeteries and burial sites.
Like a
Like, it's
lot of
very
people were,
unpopular.
yeah,
Yeah,
killed
killed
during,
during,
I don't know, way
I don't know,
back
way
in the
back in
day.
the day.
So
Yeah, I would definitely like that's a great question to just pose and maybe dig a little bit and see, because yeah, like that's a public pressure campaign right there to just be like, you can't build this here. There's a burial site. I live in southwestern PA, and they were doing an expansion of I-70 because it goes past my town. And about 5 miles away, there was an old church and a cemetery, and they tore the church down, and they didn't get authorization to move the bodies from the cemetery. Like, it wasn't allowed, so they had to build the exit ramp around the cemetery. So there's just a random cemetery next to the highway, just not attached to anything. But that just shows, like, it's very unpopular, and there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through to do it too. um so yeah, I would definitely bring that up. Any kind of local information, local stories like that that you know of, I think it's worth like questioning and bringing up. any any other specific questions? And like I said, if you don't think of anything, and you think of it later, feel free to email us, and if we don't have the info, we will try to help you find it.
yeah, and I'm still here. I just went off camera because my baby woke back up, so I'm trying to get her to go back to sleep. Um, but something I wanted to add for folks is so you have the upcoming conditional use hearing. Um, I will share in the chat footage from some of the ones up in Archbald so you can see some of the strategies that the community members used there, and some of the things that they talked about. Oh, I see a question from Kat. What is creating the demand for all these data centers? Because we're all using ChatGPT. So, okay. Um, Thank you so much for this question. Don't let these companies or any of our legislators gaslight you into thinking it's our fault that these things are being built everywhere. Our use of AI is not the main heavy use of it. I, on principle, avoid using ChatGPT and avoid shopping on Amazon, but that's a personal thing. And we, the consumers, are not the reason that they're trying to build all of these on it. It is AI, but it's because of these companies trying to figure out how quickly they can build out and make money off AI first. It's very likely that the AI bubble will burst. We're even seeing already in China, they were building a bunch of these as fast as they could, but then they had a new type of AI technology come out called DeepSeek that kind of made several of the facilities with the various graphics cards and infrastructure defunct, and now they're just sitting empty. And they're stranded assets. And that's a risk that we have here if this AI bubble bursts right in the midst of all of these being built. Another reason that a moratorium is a good idea because it gives us time to see where this technology is going to go. So, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't use ChatGPT or any of the image generator tools that they're trying to shove down our throats, but it's certainly not us, the consumers, that are the problem here. Go ahead, Chrissy.
Yeah, I put in the chat just one other, I think I announced all of the things, but just so it's in one place, we are having just to follow up and build on this momentum. And I just want to say, like, through the past couple weeks and talking to neighbors and meeting people and creating awareness about this, I've met so many people that I wouldn't have met in another way. But it's really impressive to talk to people and to hear their passion about this and to just know that we are in this together and there's this many people on this call. So I just wanted to say thank you and also to kind of build off this momentum. It's very last minute, but we were able to secure a space at Senator Katie Muth's office in Royersford on a week from yesterday. So on Monday, April 6th from probably 6:30 to 7:30 or 8. Just if people want to stop by to ask questions, to get flyers, we're going to have some materials there if you want to make a sign. Just to have it a peaceful kind of gathering beforehand. We might be able to hopefully have some signs from Josephine there at that time, like yard signs and things possibly. So there'll be reason. And if you just want to meet other people or you just still have questions and want to talk in person and not just be looking at things on social media and on Zoom. So I put the link to register in the chat. You do have to register to attend this though, because it is at Senator Muth's site, but she has been a great partner and was kind enough to coordinate to have the space available to us to meet in. So it's just so people have a touch point in person and to hopefully get some energy to go to these meetings on April 9th and the 14th and an opportunity to ask questions, get flyers. And just lastly, the best thing that we can do right now is if you're worried and concerned about this, is to talk to your neighbor. I mean, everywhere I go, my daughter, I don't have it next to me. My daughter made me this little pretend sticker and it literally just says, have you heard about the data centers? Because everywhere I go, all I do is ask people, have you heard about the data centers? And just to see how they feel about it, if they know about it, if they want to learn more, to share this information. So really like getting the word out with your neighbors and talking to your neighbors and talking to the people in the community and having those little, even if it's a quick little conversation, it really does start to build momentum and makes a really a big difference. So thanks for taking the time to be here. And thank you to um, Josephine and Matt for doing this call and for Tara for organizing it and coordinating everything. We have some great people in the community that are coming together and really stepping up.
Thank you, Chrissy. And thank you for being one of the community leaders and leading by example. Did you say that there was a color coordination? I know that folks
Oh,
yeah, what color is everybody supposed to?
red. We just wanted to do red. Our signs are red that have been out. And yeah, so red just so and I'm like, if you have a Philly shirt that's red, just red, like something, anything. Just to be able to just show the solidarity and community and that we're all like at this together, right? So yeah, if it's possible.
Thank you so much. It's 8:29. We have time for maybe one or two more questions if folks have any of them. I really encourage you to, reach out to your township to ask what the status is of what they're working on and, to see that example as soon as possible. Share the examples we have if they're looking for additional language because yeah, you really want something strong and protective in the works. Take a look at your current ordinances to see what the conditions are for the conditional use that's coming up. Because then that we saw again at some of these other hearings, the conditional use application has certain requirements, and then residents investigated the developer's application and poked holes in it and found where they did something haphazardly, etc. So take a look at those kind of a thing and see where you can, uh, put pressure on the developers and put pressure, or I should say, pull the various levers of public input to make your voices heard. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
We'll be sharing out the recording shortly. Yep, we'll send out the presentation slides, Cindy, and the recording soon. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks so much.